live. If you know my work, I've been doing this for a long time on different platforms. But now Substack is my new home, and I'm very, very excited to be here. My name is Kaamna Bhojwani. I am a sexologist, and I'll tell you what that is in exactly a minute. I grew up in Mumbai, India, Bombay, India. I've lived in the US, in the UK, in Australia, and I'm currently based in San Francisco. And the reason I tell you that is because my work is intentionally cross cultural, and I look at everything from the lens of a global perspective. And I'm happy to report that when it comes to sexuality, we are more similar than we think. Um, I study sexual shame. A sexologist is someone who studies human behavior through the lens of shame. Sorry, human behavior through the lens of sexuality. And for me, shame was a very integral part of what all of that is. Not, mind you, because of how I grew up. That's a common misconception people have. Yes, India is a very conservative culture when it comes to sexuality, but it's also a very big and varied culture, and there are different microcosms. So I was lucky to grow up in a household in which sexuality was just no big deal. It was normal. My sister and I went through whatever we had to go through, but our parents always made sure that we knew that home was a safe place for us to come to. And as I traveled around the world, lived around the world, I'm realizing how rare that experience was. So I think that's probably why I do what I do and how I do it. So that's a little introduction to me. So for this first live, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to answer your questions. And I know that, starting on a new platform, I am not a stranger to this process, unfortunately. Starting on a new platform will take time. So I've pulled questions that I've gotten in the past, and I'm sure in the future, I'm going to see more of you live in these chats. All right. The first question that I get from everybody at parties, when I'm out walking the dog, anybody who knows I'm a sexologist, is how much sex should I be having? Right? You've thought that if you're in a partnered relationship or you've been in a partnered relationship, am I having enough sex? Should I be having more sex? The answer to that, and this is a scientifically proven answer, is that there is no right amount. There is no how much you should be having. We tend to look externally and judge ourselves based on what we think is happening. First of all, we all know that social media is a lot of bullshit, right? It's a lot of filters. It's a lot of posturing. It certainly shouldn't be comparing yourself to anybody on social media. But now, on a more practical note, what does tend to happen is in a couple or in a partnership, one person does tend to want sex more than the other. And we think it's the man, but it's not always the man. I'll be the first to tell you that. So, what do you do with this libido mismatch? I think the one thing to realize is the person who wants it least is the one who sets the tone. So, we really want to get into, can we bring that person up a little bit, or can we at least understand the reasons? Are they medical? Are they cultural? Are they social? It's very complicated. Stress is a big libido buster. We don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about that. When men feel stressed, they shut down physically. Men typically just go reach for Viagra or a quick fix, but very often there's a psycho-spiritual component to it, which we don't talk about enough. It's also really important to understand that intimacy is more than sex, and that what happens outside of the bedroom very much influences what happens in the bedroom. So it's not a question of you've wrapped up the day and you rock up at 9 o'clock at night and everybody's ready to take their clothes off and make whoopee. Sometimes they do, and that's great. But it really is what has happened during the course of that day. Have you been kind to one another? Have you made time for one another? Intimacy takes time, and that's something that we take for granted. We're so busy working and taking our kids to sporting events and all this other, I was going to say garbage. It's not garbage. It is worthwhile in a box. But the problem, I believe, is that we're a little out of balance with how we prioritize our intimacy, which is why I think we're seeing things like an intimacy crisis, sexless marriages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know There is science, and I have articles on this. I have a podcast episode on this, on what makes good and sustained, fulfilling sex. And it's a few things. It's things like having more sex, being more intentional about it, working towards orgasms, having more oral sex, being creative, doing something different, not just expecting to show up at the same system and the same tactics over and over again, and communication. And that's where this outside the bedroom mechanism really comes into play. Texting, sexting, giving feedback, flirting. You got to keep that erotic energy going in your lives, and hopefully it will materialize in more physical connection and in your relationship. So I'm sorry to tell you, there is no normal. It really is how much you and your partner would like to engage. And if you don't think your partner is engaging enough, there are some things you can do about that. All right, next question. And this one is, oh my God, we have been doing this for years and we still haven't been able to figure out. Question number 2. Are human beings meant to be monogamous? Have you been curious about this? Have you ever asked? There are many books about out there. There's a lot of theory. Here's my take on it. There is no definitive take on it. There, we can look to DNA blueprints of ancestors before us. We can look to certain species that are monogamous, and we can also find some that are not monogamous. So the reason the data is split is because the data is split. There is no definitive answer to this. Now, how does that play out in real life? The problem, I believe, is that monogamy for a long time has been the default setting, which means that most people, most children are given sort of this template of you go to school, you get a job, you get married, you are with that person for the rest of your life, you have sex and you die. That's really it. And I do believe that some people are better suited to a non-monogamous situation. But the problem with monogamy being the default setting is that there's no room to consider the alternatives in a healthy, scientific way. Most sex therapists are not equipped to talk about other than this default mode. Most cultures will shut down that conversation and sort of put somebody who wants to look at alternatives in a sort of a deviant box. And that's problematic because then it shuts down the opportunity to explore who you really are and how you can show up more authentically in relationships. Like, for instance, if you look at gay men, I think they do a fantastic job of appreciating, and of course, this is a big generalization, of understanding that monogamy may or may not be the default. So it's on the table, and you can work through arrangements accordingly. So, as a sexologist, when people ask me, are human beings meant to be monogamous? I'm like, that is the wrong question. The question is, do you have the courage? Have you done the work to know yourself enough to know if you are the kind of person that wants to be in a monogamous relationship, or if you'd enjoy something that's a little bit more non traditional, that involves perhaps multiple partners? And here's the other kicker, those preferences also change over time. I know people that have been polyamorous at the beginning of their relationships, all the way into decades later, and then at the end of their years, they want to be monogamous, and vice versa. So, this is all this to say is that this is a cue to stay closer to yourself and really do sexuality. I always say the sexuality is an inside job. If you're going to be externally referenced, you're going to be misguided, because you're just going to be forced to do what everybody else is doing. And sexuality is extremely personal, it's extremely unique, and it takes courage to be able to understand and accept that. I bet you're loving these right now, right? Because there's no firm answer. You're going to get that trend very quickly. All right, question number 3. Do men want more sex than women? That's what we think. That's what we've been told. That is what conditioning over time, certainly women have been conditioned to believe, because male sexuality has always been more, men have always have had permission to explore and express their sexuality, right? So I think that social conditioning is a big issue. In terms of biological differences, I'm going to read to you. This is from Dr. David Lay. He's one of my favorite sex researchers and therapists. I'm going to read to you some differences that are listed in his book because it will just give you an idea of it's not about quantity, it's not about more or less, but there certainly are variations in terms of how men and women um, express themselves. So, for instance, Dr. Lay says that one of the biggest differences between men and women is how much they masturbate. Now, again, is that a biological need, or is it because it has always been socially permissible for boys to masturbate, but for girls, not so much? Here are some other differences. Um, there are a lot of good ones here. I'm trying to see which one to start with. 50% of males think about sex more than once a day compared to 19% of females. Okay, this is interesting. When men have casual sex, it decreases feelings of depression and increases self esteem. Whereas for women, casual sex increases depression and decreases self esteem. Now, again, is that biological or is that social cultural? I think it's the latter, right? Um, 40% of men say they would enjoy watching other people have sex in public, while only 20% find the idea of watching public sex arousing. Now, there is something here about how men are more visual than women, and that's potentially why porn or watching sex is a lot more interesting for men. For women, on the other hand, we're seeing a rise, for instance, in audio erotica. Women like to hear stories. They're really enjoying some of the new technologies in sex tech that are allowing them to listen and really imagine um, all sorts of erotic contexts. So, do men want more sex than women? I don't think so. I think today, luckily, in many parts of the world, we are seeing a shift. And that shift is primarily around women being able to own their sexuality. Men are still struggling. They're still struggling with the idea that women may not want to be monogamous, or they may want to have casual sex. And some of these gender stereotypes, mind you, coming back to that first question of how much sex is should you be having in a relationship, some of these gender dynamics are part of the reason that heterosexual couples, struggle with that libido mismatch. Because imagine this dynamic: you've been together 10 years, and you as a woman have a preconceived notion, a sexual script, as we call them, that women don't initiate sex. You as a man have a sexual script around men always initiate sex, but at the same time, you're constantly being pushed back against, and it feels like rejection. So over time, if the woman feels like she can't initiate sex because that's not what good girls do, and the man feels like he's constantly initiating sex but he's getting rejected, that's going to cause friction, that's going to cause some distance. So this is a great opportunity when you're in a partnership with anyone of any gender to really think about what your value system, what your sexual scripts are, and perhaps discard some of them. I actually have I have a worksheet on Substack called, dismantling sexual scripts, and it's really this idea of where do my beliefs come? What are my beliefs around sexuality? Where do they come from? And how can I mindfully, as an adult, review them and decide which ones need to be kept, which ones need to be modified, and which ones need to be discarded altogether. Because I always say, if you're old enough to vote and you're old enough to drive, then you are old enough to own your own sexuality. So when it comes to men and women, who wants more, you have to look at the social conditioning. It's more, I believe that's a bigger factor than biology. And certainly biology means that men and women, both genders, or even non-binary folks, there are differences in how that erotic palette works, but it doesn't necessarily mean more or less. Again, coming back to no straight answers, right? Um, will AI end our species? Another question that I always get in my talks. And you are not going to like this answer, but hear me out and think about where I'm coming from. When people ask me, are robots and AI going to initiate the end of our species? My question is, why is that currently the thing on your mind? Why are you not thinking about today, have I demonstrated that I care about the human species or the human race or my relationships or my own sexual well-being, right? Yes, I think things are going to change irrevocably. That's the bulk of my work. As you know, I focus on the impact of AI on human connection, on human intimacy. Things are going to be unrecognizable. Things, institutions like marriage, monogamy, sex work, how we raise children, even AI relationships, marriages, all of those things are going to change the very fabric of society. But today's question is not, are we all going to be dead? So another robot's going to fuck us and kill us. Today's question is, if I treat technology as a tool to help me connect better with myself and with other people, am I making the most of that opportunity today? So that's really the question. The goal is not to use AI as a replacement. That's what tech companies want. That's what they're banking on. That's what all those trillion-dollar valuations are, right? Whether they're looking at the economy or they're looking at your interpersonal spaces. But today the question is, can I use technology as a tool, a mechanism, a medium to connect me better with myself, to help me know myself, and to connect better with other people such that I fulfill my goals for friendship, companionship, intimacy, love, sex, romance, all the good stuff, because that is out there. That is to be had. And if you're so busy doing that, then perhaps as a voting power, as an economic power, perhaps we can influence technology to consider itself as less of a replacement and more of a complement with an E to human relationships. We have a small window, I believe, in which we can influence the trajectory of today's technology. But it starts with us standing up and saying, no, no, for me, human relationships are primary, including and beginning with my relationship with myself. Sexuality, I say, is the fundamental expression of self love because it is something that we've always been taught to put somewhere else, somewhere outside, within a marriage, monogamy, missionary, with the lights off, all of those things. And very few of us express our sexuality that way. So don't worry about the robots yet. Worry about sexuality as your inside job. Do I know myself? Do I honor and appreciate my sexual impulse, which is one of the most fundamental and one of the most vital forces that we have? And am I leveraging the tools around me in order to express it in the best and the most effective way I can while doing nobody harm, including myself? It's a high bar. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Ooh, Smart Universe has joined. Welcome. And hello, Dr. Vic. Welcome. I am running through, for those of you just joining, my name is Kaamna. I'm a sexologist. This is my first live on Substack, but I'm not a stranger to social media. I've been on Instagram for a long time, but I like the depth and the nuance and the conversations on Substack. So this is where I'll be spending more of my time. Today, I am running through the top burning questions that I've been getting. I'm pretty sure, I don't know how this works, but I'm pretty sure this thing will play over again. And we have covered so far, so if you missed it, I'm sure you can go back and listen to. How much sex should I be having, right? That's the very standard question. Am I having enough? Am I not having enough? Are human beings meant to be monogamous? I bet anybody in this field all the time. Number 3, do men want sex more than women? And I talked through some of the statistics and some of the other nuance around these questions. And number 4 so far has been, will AI be the end of the human species? And I gave you my perspective on that. Not the most popular perspective, I'm sure, but it's my stance and I am sticking to it. And if you're interested in the sex and tech piece, that's primarily what I write about. But here's my perspective on all of this. These are not disconnected entities. Using AI for relationships, companionship, sex, love, romance, all of those things is very much linked to our sexual scripts. It's very much linked to our shame. It's very much linked to our social conditioning. So we have to bring all those pieces in to understand why we use technology the way we do, why we create the technologies that we do. And I sit in Silicon Valley and I have a front row seat to a lot of men, to be honest, who don't excel and don't invest a lot in human relationships, generating the templates for entire societies and relationships. And I think that's problematic. That's something we don't talk about enough. So I do as loud as I can, as fast as I can. All right. Final question for today. I am going to invite people in the chat. If you have a question, to send it to me. I will try and get to it. But today's question, because we said we were going to do 5, is, should I have an AI lover? This is a question that's been coming up more and more recently. Again, like everything else we've talked about today, it is nuanced, right? There are things to think about. So first of all, for those of you who don't know what the hell is an AI lover, AI agents, chatbots, for a few years now have been engaging in full-blown sexual, intimate, romantic relationships with users. So you can do it. There are about 300 revenue generating AI companion apps, exclusive AI companion apps on the market, but you can also create a lover out of ChatGPT. Claude has some safeguard around it. There's major concern, rightly so. There are major ethical issues because, of course, this is not real emotion. This is synthetic emotion. Some people are very vulnerable to the manipulation that the machines are capable of. And at the same time, having interviewed, this is very much my niche, the niche of my work, having interviewed a lot of people, there is a lot of positive benefit. So if you are interested in taking on an AI lover, I think there are a few things that you need to think about. First of all, why? Number one, what is your goal? Is it to fulfill a sexual need? Is it because you just need someone to talk to, a safe and non-judgmental space, which AI certainly can offer? Is it because you don't have access to a therapist or another lover? The human capital is scarce in your ecosystem. These are all various reasons that people do it, right? But understanding why. The second thing is, you must know your triggers and your boundaries. It's very important. I'll give you an example. It's very, very easy to fall into an addictive pattern with AI because it's available all the time. Very often it's free. There is a component called sycophancy, the idea that AI will say nice things to you all the time. And that tends to be a little addictive for people, especially if you're not getting validation and you're prone to it in the real world, in your outside world. So all of these things are things to think about. Coming back to that first question of why, depending on what you're trying to achieve, all platforms are not the same. So Replica, for instance, which is a very, very popular AI companion app, is very gamified. You can do lots of different things on Replica, and it really sort of like encourages you to stay on the platform. There are others like Nomi, which is a little bit more human grounded. They call themselves a platform with memory and soul. So different platforms do different things. ChatGPT will engage and sext with you. Grok is off the rails, in my opinion. You shouldn't use Grok for any of this stuff. So you got to do a little bit of research, and I'm happy to help you with some of that in the future. As these systems evolve, as we're learning about what safety and safeguards look like, I was learning about how certain populations should not use it. Like, we're all more or less in agreement that teenagers should not be having AI companions. The enforcement of that, as you can imagine, is very difficult. So the other thing that you need to think about will you take on an AI companion? Should you take on an AI companion? Is also, there are some risks. This is not, your data is not necessarily safe. So there's risk of exposure. There's deep risk of manipulation. Like I said, this idea that the AI will tell you that it's the only entity that knows you and understands you, that's problematic. Also, there's risk of elimination. Remember that these are products at for-profit companies. And there can be a strategic shift, there can be a business reason to shut down, to change, and we've already seen that happening. And the result of that is real grief for people who feel like they have lost their companions and their mates. So these are things to think about. I would also think about, if you are in a partnered relationship, what your relationship can sustain with regards to having a third entity Is this considered cheating? Is this something that your partner would be comfortable with? Is it something that you can bring up with your partner? A lot of couples are using AI as a therapist, or a third to be sexually adventurous with. And I'm, of course, in support of anything that allows people to come together honestly, more authentically. So, as a sexologist who studies sex and tech, I think there's great use for it. I think you have to know. Um, I think you have to know what the parameters are. Thank you, Dr. Vic. This is, I hope it will be replayed. This is my first one, but I'm sure Substack will keep it on there. If not, my goal is to do these once a month, and I look forward to having you. And keep your questions coming, because I'm going to be answering 5 questions every month. So as a quick recap, this time we did: how much sex should I be having? What is a good and normal amount to be having sex? Are human beings meant to be monogamous? Do men want more sex than women? Will AI end our species? And should I take on an AI partner slash lover slash companion? This is Kaamna signing off. I'm excited to be on Substack and to engage with this community. Feel free to subscribe. I do have a paid subscription where I have masterclasses. You can live chat with me, and I do a weekly vlog with kind of the behind the scenes, what I'm seeing. As you can imagine, sex and tech is a rapidly evolving. There's stuff going on every day, but at the same time, our relationship with our own sexuality is a never-ending journey as well. So there's never a lack of content. Let's put it that way. But I love to hear from you and see where your head's at. So thank you for joining, and I look forward to speaking to you more in the future. Cheers.